Well, this is much better than last Sunday. And not just because there's no snow, but because I can see you in person. I have to confess that after the pandemic, I am totally zoomed out. If I never have to do another Zoom meeting, I will be most pleased, most overjoyed. But we have some people back with us that have been away for a while, and I'm going to, Sunny, are Ryan and Jet here too? Stand up where you are. They were away to sunny Costa Rica, and I thought about doing this today, but I'll take it easy on you guys. I was just gonna invite you up and talk about it, but we'll give you warning. So consider yourself warned. Next time I won't tell you ahead of time, but I'm just gonna call you up and you're gonna tell us about what that trip was like. And by the way, if you have, Sunny's actually going in July with us to, I believe, to Castelluz in Mexico. So we have 16 people already. I think tickets are all bought. There's room there for more to come with us, but you better act quick because we have to get on this one. There's a limited amount of flights, and we need to get down there all together so we can cross the border together. But if you're interested at all and you've been sitting on the fence and toying with the idea, you need to talk to me today or Rachel as well. Well, when you arrive at some place new, one of the first things you do is you pull out your cell phone and you turn it on. And you get that little spinner that starts going around and it starts searching for connection. And you start hoping it gets connected soon because you need to make, you have all kinds of things that you got to check on there that you've made. But it seems to take forever to do that. And there could be a variety of reasons, of course. If you flew into place, maybe you forgot to turn the airplane mode off. Maybe you've landed someplace where there's no service or the service signal is very weak and it just doesn't seem to connect. Or you got a plan that didn't cover that place, so it's not going to connect you up, and you just need to get a new SIM card for your phone for that time that you're there. Might have a glitch in the phone that needs rebooting, you just need a new phone. So there's all kinds of possible reasons. But I want to change the situation now, if I can. There we go. Who do I point it at? I would say, when it comes to PowerPoint, God's got the power, I got the point, and that's usually how I kind of do my PowerPoint and try to figure it out along the way. But here's a different situation. This is personal. You arrive someplace where you haven't been before as well. It may be the first day in a new school, a new university, and you look around, there's a crowd of people around. It may be a new place, place of work, a new job site, and you walk in there, and especially if it's one of these open offices where everybody has their little cubby and you're all working together in one space, you're looking around, and you don't see anybody you know. Maybe you moved into a new community and you walk around and you're trying to figure out, who do I connect with here? And you just don't know any of your neighbors. Maybe it's a new church. Or maybe you're traveling and it's a church you've never been to before. We instinctively begin to search as human beings, as people, for that same kind of sense of connection. And there's a thing along the way that we begin searching the room to see who we can connect with. See, one of the problems we face in our time is that our cell phones bring us closer to the person right next to us. We sit closer to the person next to us, but they bring us closer to the person that's far away. Now, I don't know, is this a picture of your dinner table when you eat? We have a rule at our house. No cell phones at the table because we want to engage in conversation with the person next to us. But, we live in a world where we are connected with somebody who's maybe halfway around the world, and we're totally disconnected with the person right next to us. That may be true for you right now where you're sitting. You may be sitting beside somebody who you really don't know. And now you're beginning to get a little concerned about where I'm going with this. I know that. I thought of doing something differently, but in the interest of time, we won't do that today. But again, you're warned. I will do things differently, and I'll mix you up. I want you to get to know each other because that's what it means to be community. Have you ever walked into a restaurant and seen that scene? There's two people or maybe a group of people, and they're all sitting at the table with their cell phones, and nobody's talking to each other. And she's saying to him, do you mind if I strap your phone to my forehead so I can pretend you're looking at me when I talk? Have you seen that kind of setting? Listen, if that has escaped your attention, you're probably the person with your face buried in the phone while somebody's sitting next to you. So one of the problems we face today is that we live in a very world that we're very connected with people all over the place, but we're very disconnected in a relationship with people who are right close to us. So while we are more connected in some ways than ever before, yet the reality is that loneliness is a big issue for many Canadians. Over 1 in 10 Canadians say that they're lonely either all the time or often. And about 30% of them say we're lonely at some times. The statistics can become even more serious when we're talking about a younger generation between 15 and 24, that about 25%, about 1 in 4 of our youth feel lonely either all the time or often. The statistics are only slightly lower for those who are over 25. See, the result of this in our time is the experience of anxiety and depression among adult Canadians, which is right now at its highest level than it's ever been since the pandemic in 2020. And it's taken its toll on the mental health of Canadians. And if this applies to you, it's taken the toll on your mental health as well. An article from Statistics Canada's website said, entitled, "You Are Not Alone," states, without social connections and supports, people's health and overall well-being can suffer. Time spent with family and loved ones is especially valuable during the holiday season. The gift of support we get from family, friends, and co-workers is vitally important, which is why what we're talking about today is so important as well. I want to talk about relationships. See, we were created for relationship. I know, we were created for a relationship with God. But we're created also for relationship with each other. And I know sounds really spiritual to say all I need is God, but that's simply not true. That flies in the face of the person God created you to be. And God created, and there certainly are going to be times that we find ourselves in isolation and we need God in our lives. But we really need to experience other people, relation with other people, living in community with other human beings. Now, without question, those relationships need to be healthy because most of us know only too well some very unhealthy relationships that we are experiencing right now, and I want to talk about those in a while too. But we sometimes, perhaps even often, find ourselves living with broken relationships, and search as we might, we're not making connection. There are any number of reasons for that. Busyness. We lead life at a very fast pace, no margin. I have had people who want to come and talk to me, and they say, I got 15 minutes. And then they arrive 5 minutes late or 10 minutes late because they have no margin in their life. We don't have space in our room to build open-endedly into relationships and friendships. When we go out for lunch or we go meet somebody for coffee or meet somebody, we have a timeline that we figure. It's that by a certain time rolls around, you say, well, I got to get going. I meet with very few people anymore that have some kind of sense of open-ended, let's just kind of hang out together. Let's talk. This is business. Self-centeredness. We live a me first, it's a me first approach to life that rules everything and everybody else out if it doesn't fit my convenience or my schedule or can't stand to gain something. Individualism. It's an attitude that ignores our need for others. We live in a highly individualistic time. Mobility. People move around a lot. Sometimes for work, sometimes for study, sometimes they just keep moving. But then there are those reasons that are a little bit harder to deal with, such as personality quirks. You know anybody who has personality quirks? You might be that person. The personality quirks that lead to misunderstandings and clashes and conflict with others. And then sometimes, perhaps more often than we care to admit, that conflict gets left unresolved. And over time, this rift begins to develop between people who we would normally be close to. So unresolved conflict. Past experience of hurt and pain, maybe traumatic experiences, past experience of being rejected, that cause a level of fear and distrust in us and cause us to maintain a relational distance that we would otherwise not keep. Well, we're approaching today at the end of the sermon series that we've been talking about, which is about rebooting your life. And we've been taking a look and reviewing some different aspects of our lives that kind of may give you that sense of feeling that something's not quite right and I need to do something about it. And I want to help you discover those things and do something and change those areas in your life and reboot your life and get a restart in some of those areas. So today I want to suggest to you that the possible reason for feeling that something's not right in your life is something you're probably already well aware of. And that is there's something wrong with something broken with some of the relationships that you have. But before we can talk about how to repair and restore those broken relationships, I want to talk about how we can develop and how we can develop and grow healthy relationships. I think it's important to understand the various levels of spaces in which we form those relationships. This understanding can go a long way to helping us having a realistic expectation of the various relationships we have. Now, much of what I'm going to talk about here right at the beginning is adapted from a book by Joseph Myers called The Search to Belong. And he has adapted some research work by an anthropologist named Edward T. Hall, who worked on and developed the theory of proxemics. And he theorized and he created distances in terms of physical distance about this. And this is a little bit theoretical, but bear with me because it'll help you understand where you develop relationships. I really think it's important. He talked about public space. We'll start at the bottom, work our way off. And that's the wider space around you, where we kind of come together as people and we share interests and experiences. But it never ventures into any kind of interpersonal connection or contact. You may not even know people's names. Church can be that way, by the way. But here's an example. You go to a Vancouver Canucks game or a BC Lions game, a sporting event. You even wear the jersey and there's somebody beside you that wearing jersey. You don't even know each other's names. But you have season tickets or you go regularly and of course you cheer together. What's connected you is this common interest in the team and this common goal and that's what connects you. Isn't it interesting, just a little aside, how when our teams are winning, we say, we won last night. We beat Toronto last night. But if they're losing too badly, they say, they just didn't show up last night. It goes from we to they, right? I mean, we like to associate with a winner, but we kind of distance ourselves from a loser. Happens in our relationships too as we analyze different people around. There's the next area is social, and it's where we begin to share snapshots of who we are, little pictures of talk a little bit about who common interests that we have. We begin to talk a little bit more personally about ourselves. We allow people in to see one part of ourselves, and we create an image that we want them to think of us. So we only show what we want them to think. You know, when you travel and you've seen the travel magazine and it shows the place where you're going to stay, how many times have you arrived there and you think it doesn't look anything like the pictures that were in that travelogue magazine? You only get to see what the camera shows you. We only get to see into each other's life what we choose to show each other. And listen, let's be honest. We come together like this on a Sunday morning, and the picture that we want to show each other is that we're well put together, we got life under control, and we're good. Meanwhile, things might be falling apart someplace in our lives. We'll get to that. From social, you move into personal space, which now is where we start to develop closer friendships. Friendships and relationships that develop in this space are often last a lifetime. Even sometimes when we move away, I still have friends that I've had close interaction with, and we've shared different really tough experiences together. And when we get together, it's like no time, even if it's a year, 2 years, or years have passed by. It feels like it was just yesterday that we were together. So you have these personal space. And then there's the intimate space where we reach a level of transparency with each other, where we don't put on any kind of facades. It's a place of full disclosure, sharing our thoughts and feelings and experiences at a deeper level. Listen, we need to experience relationship in each one of these areas, healthy relationships. And not every relationship is going to go to the next level. In fact, as you develop greater levels of intimacy, fewer people enter into that, and that's okay. But we need healthy relationships in each one of those areas for us to be emotionally and healthy as people. God connects with us in each one of those areas as well. We develop growing deeper in a relationship. It takes intentionality, effort, and risk. You always have to reach a level where you trust somebody to move to the next level of depth in that kind of relationship with a person, don't you? And when that trust gets betrayed, the whole thing falls apart. And it's very difficult to repair and rebuild that at times. But here's the other thing. We move to the next level in those relationships as we invite people into our lives. And we are invited into their lives. There takes a measure of risk there. It takes a measure of opening our lives up. Inviting somebody into your home is like hospitality, is inviting them into your life. Sharing a meal together is inviting somebody to have a relationship with you. The whole term of hospitality. We have looked at hospitality and fellowship as food, fun with friends. But that was not the original concept of hospitality. Hospitality literally means welcoming the stranger, the person who we don't really know all that well, inviting them into our lives, into our homes, or inviting them to share a meal together so in order to build that kind of relationship. In ancient times and places where there's people would be traveling through, you invited the alien into your home to share a meal together because you wanted to make your potential enemy your friend. We've lost track of that to our demise and to our loss of sense of community. But here's the other thing. While this diagram here has clear lines, life isn't really that neat and orderly, is it? There's wide areas of gray. Lines are blurred. And so we kind of go back and forth into these different areas. But let's take a look at the Bible now and see what kind of principles we can discover and apply to our lives in developing and growing healthy relationships. And along the way, if we have relationships that are a bit on the broken side, it'll help us also understand how we can begin to repair those. First, Paul says in Thessalonians, he says, "We loved you so much that we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well." More literal translation says, and what Paul is saying goes something like this. It says, "We were drawn to you in such a way. We were attracted to you. We were drawn to you." That, and it has a sense of intense longing to develop that kind of relationship, friendship or relationship with him. That he says that we were delighted to not only share with you the good news of Jesus, but our very lives, because he becomes so beloved to us. I think if we're serious about connecting with the world, with people who do not know Jesus, this is critical. We isolate ourselves too much. We live in our Christian ghettos. We create barriers between us and the world around us. My challenge to you, if that's the case in your life, you need to break down some of those barriers and start building friendships and relationships with people who are far from Jesus, who are far from God. the saying that says, they won't care how much you know or who you know until they know how much you care. It's not about making projects out of people. It's not about making projects and saying, what can I get out of this relationship? It's a matter of loving people and caring enough to do life together, to go to the games together, to go to concerts together, to hang out, to have backyard barbecues together, to connect with other parents whose kids are in the same school or playing on the same sports team. We build relationships as we do life together, sharing in each other's lives, building into each other's lives with no strings attached, simply because we love people and we care about them. One of the incompatible desires people have in larger cities, and this came out in a study that was done in Metro Vancouver a number of years ago, is there's a longing and a desire for community. In fact, one of the greatest expressed personal needs that they had was in Vancouver is a need for community. At the same time, in the same survey, what came out is, I don't want to know my next door neighbor. Well, listen, you can't have it both ways. If you don't know your next door neighbor, you don't have community. If you can have community, you need to get to know people and invest in their lives and invite them into your life as well. Second thing as we move along here is to accept one another, accept others for who they are. Not for who you want them to be, but for who they are. Get to know people for who God made them, how God made them, what is their personality, what are their gifts and ability, what are their interests. Accept one another, Paul says, then, just as Christ accepted you in order to bring praise to God. Now again, the word that Paul is using here is one that I want you to take note of. When he says accept one another, he's saying welcome them in. It's the same word that is used when you welcome somebody into your home. So you accept one another, you're welcoming them into your life just the way they are, offering hospitality if that's it, and you're sharing your life and your home together with them. Bear with one another and forgive one another. The two go hand in hand. To bear with somebody here, according to the word that is used, that Paul is using here, is simply to tolerate another person. Do you know somebody who irritates you? Are you looking around at that person right now? Don't. It's not a good idea, okay? We're trying to repair relationships, not break them. And sometimes people have just different quirks and they just irritate the heck out of you. Listen, if you're married, you're probably married to somebody who irritates you. see, here's something that pretty much doesn't always hold true. But you've heard of opposites attract? You know, and when you're dating and you're going out together, it's fun. You know why it's fun? Because you get to go home by yourself when it's all done. You don't have to go home with a person. Then all of a sudden you get married, and all those things that you thought were so neat and exciting and fun about the other person, does drive you nuts. I'm the introvert, okay? I know you don't think that, you don't believe that. I have to act out a personality to do what I do. Diana's the socialite, the extrovert. I was attracted to her because she just seemed like this fun-loving girl, and I thought, I got to hang out with that girl more often because I can have a lot of fun with her. Once we get married, I realized the weekend would roll around, or my days off would roll around. You know what I wanted to do? I wanted to chill at home. Just wanted to put my feet back up, watch some TV, just do nothing. What did she want to do? She wanted to go out. By the way, I also discovered that there's a right way and a wrong way to put a roll of toilet paper on the spool. Now, I will confess, I have discovered ways I can irritate her very easily. I just have to turn that toilet paper roll around the other way. Or if I walk into the living room, I just have to tilt the picture a little slight. It just has to be slightly out, because Dinah has this sense of order, very rigid order. Things have to be this way. And, well, I like to be a little bit disorderly once in a while. Bear with someone is to tolerate those differences, those things, those little idiosyncrasies that are part of their behavior and can cause some kind of irritation. It has a sense of enduring those things rather than reacting or lashing out or getting even. But on the heels of that, notice what Paul says. Bear with and forgive. Bear with each other and forgive another. Because if somebody irritates you, you're going to have to be a forgiving person along the way as well. Forgive if any of you has a grievance against someone, forgive as the Lord forgave you. And this grievances has something like, it's those misunderstandings that sometimes take place, that when they aren't dealt with, and they're left to simmer, and you never kind of resolve them, they begin to get bigger. And here's something I notice when people develop a life of conflict with each other within a relationship, especially when they're living together or they're closer to part of a family. When they first starts out, the problem comes up, the difficulty comes up, and then eventually emotions get involved, and then all of a sudden it escalates. Eventually, you know what happens? Any little thing that comes up, it goes like this exponentially right away. It's because it wasn't dealt with while it was small down here. Deal with the issues in your lives and your relationships while they're still small, and don't let them get big. The key to repairing and restoring broken relationships is forgiveness. Forgive as Christ forgave you. How did he forgive you? There were no conditions attached. In fact, when I read through the Gospels and I see Jesus going around forgiving people, they weren't even asking for forgiveness. Some friends drop a cripple down and in the middle of where he has a gathering in a house. They carve through roofs to do that. What does he do? He says, your sins are forgiven. And then when fault is found with that, who is this guy who forgives sins? He says, oh, well, just so to show you that I have the power to do that, to get up, take up your mat and walk. Jesus, you are forgiven already. If you're not living in the freedom of forgiveness, that's because you haven't received it. You just need to receive it. But we also need to be agents of forgiveness in the lives of others. So when those things come up, when we have those breaches in our relationship, forgiveness is the first step to reconciliation, restoration of that relationship. Forgiveness means not finding fault or blaming somebody. Too often, when I sit with people who want to work through something, the first thing they start saying, well, you made me do this, or you made me feel this way. You made me angry. You need to stop and own your part of the situation, the relation. What happened? Own that. You're not there to confess the other person's problem. Own that. Forgive and ask for forgiveness. And it makes all the difference. For some of you, that may the only thing that you needed to hear today. Don't let any more time go by before you work that out and you work out some kind of forgiveness and reconciliation and restore those relationships. Last one I'm going to talk about is probably one of and that is that love undergirds everything that we're talking about here. Love one another. Love is the key to being able to share your life with others without making them projects. Love is the key to accepting others for just the way who they are. Love is the key to bearing with people and forgiving them. Love is the ultimate key to developing a growing, deeper relationship with others. Jesus told his disciples, and he tells us, and it was read for us earlier, he says, "A new command I give to you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another." Peter later on picks this up when he writes, now that you have purified your lives by obeying the truth, so that you have sincere love for each other, love one another deeply from the heart. Now we have one word for love, but I want you to know that Peter here is talking that you have this sincere love. He's using the word philos love, like brotherly. Now you have this kind of love, this fraternal kind of love. Well, now take it one step deeper. Go deeper to the sacrificial love that is about the same love that Jesus showed for us. And love one another, he says, deeply from the heart. I want to take a closer look at the quality of that love that both Jesus and Peter are talking about. We read 1 Corinthians 13 earlier, and it's a text that we most often hear read at weddings. I want you to know that Paul is not thinking about married couples and marriage when he writes this chapter in the 1 Corinthians. He has in mind the community of believers. This type of love was meant to be experienced within the church, not within an intimate relationship of a married couple. That too, no question. But it was meant to love to experience among us together. As we call ourselves followers of Jesus, and we meet together, we work together, we do life together. It's a good reminder, actually, that all of Paul's letters were written to churches, not to individuals. We tend to try to apply everything individual in our life, and there is that individual application that we can take. But we lose sight of the sense that they were written to a community. So I just want to go over this slowly. And I want you to think about each one phrase as say, and I'm not saying to say give yourself a grade because that's too numerical and too rigid. But how are you doing in each one of these in your love for others? And maybe think particularly of that relationship on which you're a little bit strained right now, where things are maybe really strange and already broken. And think about how this can apply within that. So if you need to close your eyes, don't go to sleep. To reflect on it, do so. I'm going to want to read through this. I want you to be thinking and reflecting on how this works out in your life and how it is working out. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not boast. Love is not proud. Love does not dishonor others. Love is not self-seeking. Love is not easily angered. Love keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with truth. Love always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. Given this description of love, how are you doing in your relationships, regardless of which relational space they are in? The truth is, that kind of love is impossible for us to have, much less do on command, at least on our own. Have you ever thought about that? We're commanded to love. But I think we instinctively know that love cannot be commanded. tell me you haven't been here, at least if you have to think back a lot of years to maybe your junior high days. Some of you don't have to think back that far. And you're just madly in love with somebody. But they don't have the time of day for you. Now, you think, I wish I could make them love me. But see, love commanded or coerced or in simple legalistic obedience is no love at all. And see, that's the problem with our brokenness in the world. Is God created us to live in a love relationship with Him and with each other. But for it to be genuine love, we had to have the option not to love. And we've exercised that option. And that exercising that option not to love is what's created this distance between us and God that only Jesus has been able to bridge. And the same thing holds true today in our lives and our relationships with others. So to love in this way, in any kind of consistent basis, can only simply take place as we experience the ongoing inward transforming work of the Holy Spirit in our lives. If there's somebody in your life you're saying, I have difficulty in loving, I don't even like them, but I have difficulty loving them. Ask God to do the work in your heart, to give you a heart of love, because you can't manufacture that on your own. It takes the transforming work of the Spirit in our lives to develop a heart of love. As a pastor, I've been there. And one of the things I realized a long time ago, that the people who most needed my love were the people who were hardest to love. If you're in any kind of area of ministry, you understand that. And I did youth work for the first 4 years I was in Prince George. And I realized that there was one particular person who I was just really happy when she didn't show up, because I'm thinking, okay, tonight's going to be a good youth night. Because she was a burr my sound. And it didn't matter what kind of time she had, she'd go home and complain to her parents about it, and at 10 o'clock, sure enough, I'd have her dad on the phone, tearing a strip off my hide up and down because his daughter didn't have a good time at youth. It was not the case. And finally, I realized God needed to do work in my heart, because she needed to know she was loved. She came out of a very dysfunctional home. She needed to know what it was to be loved in a proper way. And I can say I went for many long walks. We lived a block off in the Chaco River. I had a lot of long conversation with God about that. And I can honestly say I reached that point, not on my own, but God's transforming work in my life, where I could say, I love you to her. You can do the same thing. God can transform your heart and give you that ability. God has demonstrated His love for us. Paul says, see, at just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. And very rarely will anyone die for a righteous person, though for a good person someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrates His own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. While we were in rebellion, while we were doing everything we could to be alienated from Him, He writes, He loved us. And He went to great lengths to show that love for us. You know, John writes at the beginning of his chapter, his account of life and ministry on Jesus' earth, and the beginning, and these are some of my favorite passages in those 14 first verses of John. He said, in the beginning was the Word. In other words, he's referring to Jesus. And the Word was with God. And the Word was God. But then, the Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us. Literally, He pitched His tent and tabernacle with us. He pitched His tent. He moved into the neighborhood. You see, God came into our space so that we could come into His space. God met us in our public space and brought us into a more social space, into a more personal space, into an intimate space, so we could experience the intimacy of a relationship with Him. We will be closing this service with celebrating communion, but that's what communion is all about. It's remembering, recommitting, and perhaps for some, it's a commitment for a first time to say, this is something I need in my own life. Let me go back to the whole idea of repairing and restoring broken relationships. If you feel like there's something that hasn't been quite right in your life, this could very likely be it. Over the course of my years as a pastor, I've done a lot of funerals. And some of them are celebrations of life. And if a funeral can be enjoyable, they're enjoyable. Somebody's lived a good life. They've loved people and people loved them back. Then there's other funerals where I've been called into the family, and my normal procedure is I want to meet with the family and close friends together before we actually do the service. I just want to get to know, especially if it's somebody I didn't know in life, I want to get to know who the person is. I don't do things by the book. I like to personalize it. And I can tell you there's one family in particular that I've now done probably about 4, maybe 5 funerals for. And every time, nothing's changed. I'll walk into that room where we know each other now by name. We have friendships together. And I can cut the tension with a knife, and I'm thinking these people have not talked to each other since the last funeral that they were at. Let me date myself. Anybody know about the group Mike and the Mechanics? I was actually thinking of closing with a song there, but at that I realized we're going to communion, and Rayanne has prepared a song that leads us into communion a whole lot better than this song. But they had a song called The Living Years. And it describes a son's experience and feeling of regret because he didn't say what he needed to say to his dad, who's now deceased, in the living years. He recognizes that there were generations apart that they had their issues. He says, I just wish I could have told him in the living years. One point he says, so we open up a quarrel between the present and the past. We only sacrifice the future. It's the bitterness that lasts. And the refrain that he repeats in here is, say it loud. Say it clear. You can listen as well as you hear, because it's too late. It's too late when we die to admit we don't see eye to eye. Resolve things during the living years while it's possible to do that. Live without regrets. To live without regret is to live with a short list of accounts, and to forgive and to write those things off when it's up to you to do so. Not to hold grudges, and to be able to move on and move through it, in spite of how the other person might respond or not respond or react to us. Jesus died for us, that we might go free. He calls us to be as forgiving as he was. It is the key. Love and forgiveness are the key to healthy relationships, to growing in healthy relationships. Father, thank you that you loved us so much, that you entered into our space, that we might come into your space in an intimate relationship with you as our Father in heaven. Father, may we be agents of that same grace and forgiveness, love and acceptance. And those whom we live with, those whom we connect with, but those all around us, they are people you love too as much as you've loved us. May we forgive as you have forgiven us. May we love in the same way. Thank you, Father, for your awesome love for us. In Jesus' name, amen.